Well, hello. I'm here with Doug, talking about AI being too expensive today. And it's Friday, April 26, 2024. But you're first, Doug.
Yeah, Sam, boy, do we have some stories today. So, do you remember Stuxnet? Let's go back in time. What was that? Maybe, gosh, 8 years ago?
Yeah. Military operation from the US, Israel, and I think Germany on Iran.
Yeah, and the whole point of Stuxnet was it was a new type of virus that was highly targeted, and it was packaged a little bit differently, and it targeted the Iran centrifuges so that they would spin faster than they should. And the displays would say, oh, everything is normal, but then they'd fly apart and destroy themselves, is
Yeah.
essentially what was going on. Okay. So, just out of curiosity, have you heard of any other Stuxnet type attacks?
No, there was a huge argument about this. At the time, they said, now we've
Yeah.
opened the floodgates. There's going to be these physically destructive attacks. Now, I have
Yes.
heard of them in the OT space. Like there was an attack on a Saudi oil, Russian attack on a Saudi oil producing station to try to turn off the safety protocols and get people killed. That one failed. But there was another one that succeeded, I think, against an Iranian refinery that actually caused it to malfunction and dump the molten iron in the wrong place and set fire to the place. So
Yeah.
they're having it, but those are
Okay.
not viruses. Those are specific remote control attacks over the OT.
So was that based on Stuxnet?
No. I said
No.
it
Yeah.
didn't. All they do is they find OT vulnerabilities, the same thing the Chinese are doing to our water treatment plants today. All you have to do is connect and start issuing commands.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. So a little bit different. So Stuxnet, you're right. I heard the talk there with security experts
Yeah.
is, oh, this is a new type of virus. It's highly targeted. We're going to see this. It's going to change the landscape. And I guess my point being is, I haven't heard anything about it in 8 years or 10. I don't think it's been 10 years, but that was probably what, 2015? Gosh, that is going on 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Okay. And
I
anyway, so
say this every time something new comes out, they say all the bad guys are going to be doing this, but the bad guys don't seem to be very innovative. They don't jump on the latest thing.
yeah.
They just keep doing the same old thing.
Yeah, I wonder if it's because this is more of a precision surgical attack, if you will, than a general, shotgun blast out there. This is highly specialized. Okay, anyway, let me get to the story.
Yeah.
So, Ukrainian hackers, it's a group called Blackjack, created FUXNet, and it's you say it just as it sounds, FuxNet.
Mhm.
And Blackjack, again, its Ukrainian security services, has claimed to launch attacks against several key Russian organizations. They targeted ISPs, utilities, data centers, Russian military, and caused significant damage and exfiltrated sensitive information. And some of their targets were airports, water, sewage, and just like what you're talking about, OT, right? Industrial type facilities.
Yeah, but it actually breaks stuff.
Well,
It broke the routers.
yeah. Let me get to that in a second. So what they did was they disabled. It's claimed about 87,000 sensors,
Yeah.
and including airports, subway systems, gas pipelines, things along those lines. And what's interesting is they didn't destroy the sensors, but they did destroy the NAND memory chip in the routers.
Right.
And the way that they did that, again, was kind of clever. They just did massive writes. And so you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right, you're right. And eventually the dielectric in the NAND chips breaks down. And then in theory or in practice, I guess, in reality, the chip becomes defective. And I would argue that it's probably not the entire chip, it's some memory cells, but I guess it's enough that renders the chip not unusable.
Well, they also wiped out the bootloader and such. So even if they didn't
Yeah,
physically destroy the chip, they made it so you're going to have to like drive out and touch the device to fix it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yeah, pretty clever on that. But you want to add anything? So, here we go. This is now, warfare of the cyber type, which I would argue began pretty much in World War II with the Enigma machine and decoding that, and the Lorentz and Purple, if you know Japan,
Yeah.
their Enigma machine.
Yeah. Well, we're living in a cyber war. We have been.
Yep.
Uh, it,
So,
yeah.
yeah, the question is, it's an annoyance. And what's kind of interesting is since it went after subway system, gas pipelines, and I'm assuming that's used for heating, but water and sewage, those are basic needs of Russians
Yeah.
or anyone. I shouldn't say Russians, but of
Yeah. Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah.
But here we're going after civilian targets.
Well, yeah.
But yep. And I guess, that all began in World War II when we began firebombing, both sides began firebombing cities.
Well, that's the way it always was. I remember Sparta said the glory of Sparta is that Sparta hasn't burned in 700 years. I mean, it was typical thing in warfare then was just burn down the whole city and kill everybody.
Yeah, yeah,
This is
yeah,
very modern invention to actually imagine there's such a thing as innocent civilians that aren't targets.
yeah. Yeah. So, the war continues. What can we say? And I've not been following it. I don't know if you have. Is Russia doing well or Ukraine or what?
Russia's,
What's the score?
oh, Ukraine is losing.
Yeah,
All reports are Ukraine has been losing because the United States quit giving them arms until like this week. We didn't give them anything for 6 months, so they haven't had enough bullets or missiles or anything.
I see.
Now we finally passed the package, and so supposedly around next week we're going to start giving them arms again, maybe in time to save some of the ones that haven't already been killed.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the war is going to be prolonged now.
Well, that's unclear. Um, but but certainly we're going to promote the Ukrainians a little bit more now. And after
Yeah,
this, it all depends on the next election. And if Trump gets in, then that'll be the end of the help you for Ukraine.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting what an election can do, huh?
This is the problem with democracy. Right from
Yeah,
the beginning, they said democracy, you have the people vote for someone, they might choose someone crazy. Then in a couple of years, you just change it again. Whereas if you had like a hereditary monarchy with a king that would rule for 40 years, there'd be more stability, which is true.
yeah, 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 yeah. It is.
I'm sort of fond of American democracy, but it is an anomaly. And it's an unstable situation like a bowling ball in the head of a pin. You get it for a while, and then it falls apart.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So that's what we got with Blackjack and
Yeah.
Stuxnet, and it'll be interesting to see if there are other attacks using Stuxnet type virus
Oh,
packaging.
undoubtedly. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so, so Mandiant has put out their trends of their investigations of incident response, and it's got a lot of interesting things in it. I think perhaps the most important one is that they're showing increased targeting of edge devices. I was just reading about Cisco 0 days being used to take over devices through the ASA firewall,
yep,
and also Fortinet. And there's tons of people now they attack your firewalls and your VPN concentrators, and none of those devices have any security. They don't have antivirus. They don't even seem to have tripwire type integrity protection. I was thinking I would just charge extra money and sell you a firewall that has secure boot and cryptographic verification that it hasn't been compromised, which wouldn't seem to be too difficult for such a simple device where you almost never change anything to just say every time you see the green light come on, we have verified that all the files on this firewall are intact.
huh?
But there's
Interesting.
currently nothing like that. And so they come in through your firewalls and they're defenseless.
Yeah, boy, you're right about that, right? There's no boot integrity. None of that exists.
Nobody ever considered
Yeah,
firewall a target. And
yeah,
and so they say this is the most common initial infection vector is now exploits. Phishing is number two at only half as much. And so there's a
interesting.
50% growth in 0 day usage, and many more people are using living off the land, so they're not using malware. I was amazed when I heard the report the median dwell time is now down to 10 days, but that's because half the attacks are ransomware attacks, and ransomware attacks announce their presence. quickly.
Yeah,
But for non-ransomware investigations, it's down to 13 days. And boy, I heard some old numbers that was like 270 days, but that was like
right.
it's been coming down every year. So apparently, a lot of companies, half the time they detect it internally too, not externally. So apparently, a lot of companies really are doing network security monitoring and detecting uh, intrusions much more quickly
I see.
within two
I see.
weeks. And those are the big, anyway, those are the big points. One of these
Yeah.
reports more interesting than most of them are. So
Yep.
I remember when in 2010, when Google had hacked, shortly thereafter, I went to a conference and they had all the major firewall vendors up there and all the corporation representatives screaming at them, "We paid you $100,000." And the Chinese just blast right through that stuff like it's not there. What's wrong with this picture? And they said, "We promise by 6 months we'll have AI that will stop attacks with no signatures on the wire." And you're like, you won't have that. And they didn't have that. But they put, here's what we now recommend. You have to have network monitoring, an incident response team, threat hunters finding problems. And I said, that's insane. That's way too much work. Nobody's going to do that. But people are doing that now. At
Yeah.
that time, it sounded like science fiction. Now it is becoming more or less the industry norm to do all that.
Yeah. 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 I would agree.
Yeah.
I
Well,
would
what do you
agree.
got?
All right. So, in this war between the apps and banning apps, China just banned Western encrypted messaging apps.
Yep.
As America, right over here, we're trying to ban TikTok.
Yeah.
So it's
We
sort of
started it
a
all. We started it
yeah,
all by banning Huawei.
yeah, well, yeah. It's kind of this tit for tat that's going on back and forth, is the way I see this.
It's the Cold War, what it is. I've been reading
Yep.
over the past 10 years, it's been happening. I mean, China had this position of being behind and needing help and being sort of helpless, the centuries of humiliation. And now they've caught up. And now we're moving from being sort of friendly to being more and more hostile and competing. And yeah,
Well, Sam, are you saying they don't need to steal our technology as much anymore? And
well,
they're on par with us?
yes, I think that's right. I think
Yeah.
the field has leveled to where there's not this huge technological difference. In fact, a lot of reports say the Huawei stuff is better and cheaper than the American stuff. And the Europeans are very unhappy when Americans say quit buying Huawei and they say, we need this stuff. You aren't selling anything this good.
Yeah. So we'll see. And yeah, I don't know where this TikTok ban is right now, but I think
Passed,
it,
supposed,
it passed
yeah,
and it's supposed to be
And Biden
sold,
signed
right?
it. It was part of that same package that funded the Ukraine. So
I
that
see.
means TikTok has to sell within 9 months or it'll be banned from the American app stores, unless it gets held up in court, which it very well might.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, why are we banning it? What's the threat?
Uh, there are two arguments. One is
Okay.
that the Chinese are stealing our data, which is completely bogus, of course, because our data is
Right.
everywhere anyway. The other argument is that already laws that say Rupert Murdoch had to become an American citizen when he put out Fox News. You're not allowed to own more than like 20% of a major news source in America unless you're a citizen. And so they say it makes no sense to let China own a major news source for a large portion of our population, which TikTok is. That's the argument. It gives
Yeah.
up foreign control too much propaganda power in America.
So I'd have to ask, is TikTok, this is a legal issue. What's the definition of a news source? And is TikTok a news source? You see where I'm going.
Well, sure, and I don't think
Yeah.
there's well, but they passed this specific bill targeting TikTok, so apparently it wasn't covered by the previous bills. But
Yeah.
the sort of logical justification is that it amounts to be a news source, and therefore it ought to be banned on the same grounds as other news sources. That we don't have foreign sources of news allowed here to any large extent. Of course, then you could ask, why don't we? But anyway,
Yeah. 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 That's a deeper question, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah, we're governed by laws, so got to see. Yeah, they're theoretically supposed to be applied.
Well, last night I was listening to the Supreme Court talk about Trump's immunity, and they were a whole lot far from being covered by laws. Holy cow. It's unbelievable stuff. I don't know if you've been listening to it.
No.
Well, see, the lower courts threw away. He claimed, I'm absolutely immune. I can do anything as president, and you can't prosecute me. And the first
Right.
court said, that's just garbage. This is ridiculous, and threw it away. Next court threw it away immediately with no comment. The Supreme Court took the case, which baffled everybody. Now the five male conservative justices on the Supreme Court are seriously saying, well, he should be able to execute his political opponents, to sell secrets for his personal money, for his personal enrichment, and all that should be non-prosecutable. They're seriously arguing this right now in the Supreme Court. It's like
Mm,
science fiction. And the women, the liberals, will come in and say, why don't we like actually resolve this case and not go flying off into fantasies? Because those issues are not in this case. And they say,
yeah.
oh no, let's not talk about this case. Let's talk about this stuff. So I mean, it's amazingly corrupt and scary. It's very far from a state governed by laws. They really are seriously considering explicitly putting the president above the law like a medieval king.
So we saw that sort of, I'm not trying to draw parallels, but didn't we see that in Europe about 80 years ago?
Well, of course. Well, I mean, the old monarchies had it all along. The king is above.
Yeah,
And this seems to be a popular. I thought the whole point of America, this is what I think Ketanji Brown Jackson said. Wait a minute, the whole point of America was that we don't believe the king is above the law here. That's why
yeah,
we made America. But our current Supreme Court seems to be against that, which
yeah.
is pretty
Interesting.
amazing.
Huh. Yeah, Sam, the Supreme Court, when it started off, whenever it was formed in
Yeah,
what, 1780s,
right from the start, I think.
90s,
Yeah,
yeah, was pretty powerless.
it was.
And yeah, it didn't have much to do. And I think it took about 100 years, give or take, before it really became the powerhouse that we know it as today.
It is still effectively powerless. They don't have any enforcement power. All they have is influence.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But yeah. But
And
what
Andrew
I'm getting
Jackson
at
just
is,
totally ignored Supreme Court rulings, said, well, let them enforce it. I'll just completely ignore them.
yeah, but their influence for the first 100 years or so was pretty minimal,
Yeah, they got more
is
power.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
So whose turn is it? Mine, yours? Where are we at?
let's see. You were talking
Oh,
about,
wait. I got to ask this. I'm
yeah,
sure the ban of TikTok was to prevent harm to the children, protect them from pedophiles, and we got
protect
to
them,
throw that in there.
protect them from pedophiles. I mean,
Well, you got to throw that in there. It
well, yeah, but
sounds
that makes
good.
no sense at all. I mean,
Forget
pedophiles are
that.
on Facebook. They're all over all the social networks. It's not like TikTok is the major problem there.
No, but you got to pass the bill, and it sounds good to people who don't look at the facts
Well,
or
okay.
don't understand the technology.
Yeah, I think the argument that in principle a foreign government could control it is the strongest argument. It's not completely without merit.
Yeah. And, I did a little bit of reading on that, and that I believe came about, gosh, about 100 years, 110, about 120 years or 110 years ago with radio, when radio became popular.
Hmm.
It was thought that we shouldn't have foreign influence propaganda.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm
yeah,
thinking of Voice of America and Tokyo Rose. I mean, propaganda on the
yeah,
radio has been a thing all along. And the other thing I've read is that TikTok really does not want to be sold to an American. They say they only make 20% of their money in America, and they've
yeah.
switched to being much more strongly under Chinese control. It sounds like TikTok is going to refuse to sell and just let themselves be banned.
Hmm.
But we'll see.
Boy, that's going to set an interesting precedent, don't you think? Banning apps.
Well, I guess I don't know if it'll exactly change things. It's it's arguably a bill of attainder. That's the other issue. You're not allowed to pass a law to target just one thing. That's another issue. So I find the
Yeah,
courts may very well snarl it up and stop this.
yeah, yeah. I wonder if it's going to kind of fall into the category of book banning. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, if you know a little bit of the history about book banning,
yeah.
that began in LA in I think the 1950s when there were erotic books being sold in the bookstore, and the bookstore got sued saying you can't sue those or you can't sell those books.
It also goes all the way back through Erasmus and everything. Uh, ever since we've had books, there have been huge arguments about banning the books.
Yeah, yeah. And same with the scrolls, right?
Well, I
We
don't,
had to
but I
ban
imagine.
pornographic scrolls way back when.
I would imagine. Yes, yeah. All right.
I'm joking there. I
Well,
don't know for sure. All right,
I
let's
would
go
imagine.
on.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, there was a company that made one of these. You've seen these charts, like how much time would it take to crack your password?
yeah, yeah,
And so these
yeah,
guys made a chart and said even 8-character passwords with bcrypt encryption are not safe, is the headline. And I said, how is that possible? So the funny thing is looking at the chart, the difference is not that the encryption has changed, it's the hardware has changed. The old one used to say, with one CPU, with two CPUs, things like that. Well, now they added a line with ChatGPT, which is 10,000 GPUs. And suddenly they can crack anything, as you would imagine. Um, I remember I made one of these charts years ago in my cryptography class. I said, what it will build is enough encryption. And I said, well, let's consider the total computing power of the planet, which is basically the Bitcoin hash rate. And
yeah,
if you consider that, that's probably a realistic. Let's make it encrypted enough that you couldn't crack it with that. But anyway, that's essentially what GPUs are, and that's what I made the title of the episode, because the big issue that's becoming really obvious is AI is just too expensive. It takes these insane devices to run these things like ChatGPT that are so powerful they can crack password hashes. And Meta stock fell, I think, 14% in one day because they admitted how much it is costing them to run the AI and how long it's going to be before they actually project that they're going to make any money off it. And people are depressed. That's why I think, in the Gartner hype cycle where this is the greatest thing and then suddenly it hits a peak and then people turn against it. I think AI is hitting the peak and people are starting to turn against it, saying, wait a minute, this isn't really that helpful and it costs way too much. And your promise that it's going to get 10 times better is looking more and more unlikely.
yeah, yeah. No, I would agree. I would
Yeah,
agree.
yeah,
So, there's a comic that's floating around. You may have seen this, and somebody said that, the pitch decks that you use to go to venture capitalists,
yeah,
and the manager is saying, get out all those crypto PowerPoint presentations, and just do a global search and replace with the cryptocurrency with AI.
yeah. Well,
So,
of course, to be fair, the AI is more
yeah,
productive than cryptocurrency. I mean, cryptocurrency kind of never had any use at all. AI does, in fact, write things for you that are useful.
yeah, but cryptocurrency has sort of found some little niche homes. It is being is right. There are investments in it.
Yeah, but it's a fringe player. Whereas I think
Yeah,
Microsoft really is making AI. We're all going to be using AI constantly. We're going to be using it in Windows and in Excel and everything. It's just going to be part of all the software from now on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's a new feature. It's going to be included.
Yeah, it has some real value. Just like always,
Yeah,
it's not as great or as terrible. It's not going to end the world. And it's not going to get everybody fired and replaced by AI. It's just going to be the new feature in your Office suite, which is
yeah,
useful. Yeah,
yeah. And maybe you use it, maybe you don't. Kind of
yeah.
like Office Lens or
Lens. What is Office Lens?
oh, that's part of the Office suite.
What does it do?
It's
I never even
it's an
heard.
app. It's a camera app that you can run on your phone. You don't know Office Lens?
What does it have to do with Office?
It's just part of the Microsoft suite.
So,
Excel, Word,
so what,
PowerPoint,
what does it do? Automatically
Publisher.
stick your photograph in a Word document or something?
No, no. So you run it on your camera, and there's a setting so you can take a picture of a whiteboard. You can take
Oh,
a normal picture. It's kind of some specialized. And if you take a picture with your camera, it goes direct into OneNote.
now, I saw one of the things I saw like 6 months ago was people could take like a photograph of a handwritten whiteboard with like a flow chart and ChatGPT would write all the code.
Oh, oh,
And actually
I've not
understand it and turn it into modules and stuff.
so the camera portion,
Yeah.
now you got me curious, but not that curious. But I'm assuming they would use Office Lens to take the photo. And as I recall, there are different settings in there for the type of photo you want to take, but it was more for note taking, if you will, or that was one of the uses
Yeah, I
for
think
it.
that's the current use, but the thing is AI
Yeah,
can actually to some extent understand what you're saying and work from it. So
Yeah. I could see that easily working or easily happening. You need character, optical
OCD essentially.
character.
Yeah.
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 Um, and I'll tell you, there are a lot of people that are against me, but I use OneNote, and I've been using OneNote for a long time.
Yeah, I know.
There are other products out there like Evernote, but I tell my students use OneNote
Yeah.
because you put things in there and they're easily searchable, they're easily found,
Yeah.
years later.
Yeah, I got students who like it. I just use my website like that.
Yeah, but you can't, it's not the same with a website. There are other things you can do. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah,
So that's my plug for OneNote. I
that's fine.
strongly encourage people to use that.
All right.
Your turn or my turn? Where
I
are
think
we?
it's your turn. I want to hear
My
about
turn.
TurboTax. I couldn't find a link about this.
Now I can't find a link about this, and now I forgot where I heard this, but there was a programmer who decided to reverse engineer because they thought, I've just filled out my taxes. Let me go through and do a recalculation. And they thought, boy, this is funny. Why does TurboTax need 5, 10, 15 seconds to spin around and say processing, processing, processing?
And all it's doing is
It's
adding up a total.
yeah, right. It's like a spreadsheet total. You type
Yeah.
it in, you got the number there. So he thought, what the heck is going on? So I believe he reverse engineered the code and just found a number of pause statements. And the thought being that if it just calculated your tax return like Excel, well then it must not be doing anything.
Yeah.
So by adding the pauses, it's making customers think like, oh, it must be thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm kind of adding that in there because I think it's kind of funny.
Yeah. It sounds
And
realistic. Yeah.
but right, from a user interface point of view, it makes perfect sense, does it not?
I suppose.
From a tech point of view, it makes no sense at all. But just to kind of beat on TurboTax a little bit more, you remember a couple years ago they got busted. I believe they received millions of dollars to create tax-free filing software for the public. They
Free.
were they were awarded, I don't know,
And
$10
they
million
advertised
dollars,
it as being free.
and they advertised it as being free. The problem is to find where the free link was, you had to go through 25 different screens and be able to read in 6 or 8 point.
Oh, and you had to have like certain kind of income and I whatever you did, you'd put it in and it would say, oh, you don't qualify for the free version. You have to pay $80.
Yeah. And TurboTax, I think, made more money,
Yeah.
not only from creating the software, but more money selling the free software, if you will.
Oh, and they've sent lobbyists to like block the IRS from making a free online tax filing tool, which they wanted to do. And
Yeah.
they've like blocked them in court from doing that. So it's pretty much a scam.
Yeah. It's a business model. Can I
Yeah,
say
that's
that?
that's the polite word for a scam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But but TurboTax was awarded a contract by the government, and I'll say IRS, I'm not sure
Yeah.
who, to produce free software for us, for low income people to
Yeah.
file online. And then they wound up charging for it. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah.
Enough on TurboTax.
Why don't you go on to this athletic director with the AI voice? That's that's a good one.
Sorry, I'm kind of laughing because some of these are just so comical. So, a school athletic director was arrested for framing a principal using AI voice synthesis. So, here we go on to the deep fakes.
Yeah. Remember?
So, this happened. Oh, go ahead. This
Oh,
was
go
in
ahead.
Baltimore.
Yeah.
Uh, and he was using AI to impersonate the principal. And somehow,
He got the principal to say awful racist things and stuff,
yeah, and got
which a
him
lot of people
arrested.
believed.
Yeah,
And
right.
this reminds me of the friendship courses we took where somebody will say, I didn't put that kiddie porn on my machine. Some virus put it on there. And that problem is that defense is getting more and more plausible. Somebody
Yeah,
totally could like frame you by taking convincing looking evidence that you did something bad.
yeah. And we talked about the Zoom meeting. that had 9 or 10 AI participants with
Yeah.
one real person who was in finance and wired $55 million.
Yeah. They got MITRE, the people that made the attack company with business email compromise, I think. Was it? No.
Who was it?
No, it was someone major security company. No, it was the Lincoln Project. They got with business email compromise. They got MITRE through their Ubiquity 0 days. But this is the thing I tell people, nobody's safe. Everybody gets hacked. Everybody gets social engineered. Everybody gets scammed. It's
Yeah.
nobody, if you think you're safe, that just makes you more vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah, you have to be instead, when I was growing up, you were street smart. Now you got to be cyber smart,
You do.
cybercrime smart. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
And
know.
you have to, I think, admit that you could be fooled. You, especially people think, oh, I'm a professional, I'm smart. This is like that just makes you dumber.
So, Sam, that brings up yet another one, but that kind of leads into my next story here about AT&T's breach.
Yeah.
So, you know about AT&T's breach? I do not that much,
I
but
don't know.
it's AT&T sent out a breach letter. And let me start with that they're either 73 million or 53 million, depending on who you talk to, AT&T or law enforcement, whoever they had to report to. The compromised data included one or more of the following: full names, email addresses, mailing addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers. Uh-oh, that was a bad one. Dates of birth, another bad one, and AT&T account numbers and AT&T passcodes. So AT&T promptly did their due diligence. They reported it as required by law, and then they sent out an email to everyone. And they told everybody in this email, about the breach. Well, someone received that email and is now sending out to all those email addresses. I'm making that part up because I'm not sure, but they're blasting out the same letter with a link in it saying, "Oh, you need to verify your information. Please click here to change your password," or some crud like that, which is actually a complete scam. And you said that it's becoming difficult for professionals to tell.
Yeah.
And the way I learned about this is a professional did get scammed. And then as soon as they typed in their password, they thought, wait a minute, this seems like a scam. I'm going to back out and I'm going to change my password again. But point being is, the letter is genuine and it is the real letterhead. And I got to hand it to somebody because all they had to do was add a code in there, modify the letter saying click here, and resend it out. And if you look at it, it looks genuine. In last couple episodes, I talked about Fast Track, which are the little toll ticket things. And same thing, there's a letter there that's going out. It's got the Fast Track logo. The dollar amount is off, but there's a link to pay with a credit card. And my daughter, she didn't get fooled, but she questioned it and
Yeah.
brought it to my attention. And I thought, it's got to be a scam. And sure enough, to verify, I called Fast Track. And they're now sending out emails saying, please don't pay. This is a scam. So, low hanging fruit scams, I got to admit, this is high school level, right?
Well, I think the fundamental rule of all social engineering is first you have to knock them off balance. You have to
Yeah.
catch them at a moment when they're like rushing out the door or upset and not really thinking as much as usual. And that's easy to do. I remember I was on BART in a crowded train, and this guy with a big smile was just pushing past everybody for no apparent reason, walking from train to train, shoving through people just to make everybody upset. And I think his partner was ripping up, picking their pockets.
Yeah.
They just create a situation where you're not as alert as usual.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that happens to everybody.
Yeah. 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 I don't, yeah. Yeah. Years ago, do you remember James Randi, the
Yeah,
magician, the
debunk the
amazing
magician.
Randy?
Yeah,
Yeah. He debunked, he was on Johnny Carson's show. He was
yeah.
quite popular.
Mhm.
He, um, he I forgot how he got there, but he went to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. No, correction, Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And this was in the area of telepathic viewing and all that kind of garbage stuff.
Yeah.
And he was able to demonstrate to them how he could put a box of matches on his wrist and raise it through psychological powers. And really, it was a magic trick where he just pinched the skin, and by tightening and loosening his skin, he could raise and lower the matches, the box of matches.
Mhm.
And the people at the scientists, these are PhDs, were amazed. They were completely fooled by it.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So
Highly, highly educated people are
yes.
more vulnerable. And I've thought about this all my life because I've been that guy, the scientist more likely to fall for scams. But
Yeah.
you think about crazy stuff like quantum mechanics and rocket ships and everything. You think about stuff that is basically magic all the time anyway and take it seriously. So when someone says I can use psychic power to levitate something, you say, well, maybe so. Maybe there's a way. It makes sense.
I mean, that's what science is about, is questioning.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Thinking that maybe some crazy thing would be possible that no one ever did before, that would be great.
yes, 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 except it's always Occam's razor. The simplest explanation most of the time is really what it is.
Well, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
and this was just a simple, simple bar trick,
yeah,
bar magic trick, if you will. All
yeah.
right, you got another one for us?
I got the last one I got. I just want to recommend On with Kara Swisher, her podcast. She had one where she talked about national security with Dmitry Alperovitch from CrowdStrike and Chris Krebs, who was the national security advisor until Trump fired him for saying the election was not rigged. And they are both discussing how to prevent war with China. And I've been very interested in watching this happen for the last 10 years as we get more and more close to war with China. And they explain in really depressing detail what's going to happen. Al Perovich even has a specific date in 2028 when he says war with China will start, because apparently in China you can't have leaders in their 80s. So um, Xi Jinping will be in his last term. It'll be his last chance to make his mark. And they really want Taiwan, and they've been trying to slowly get it, and it's not working. So he has detailed analysis. Both of them say this Cold War with China is real. It's going to get worse and worse, and we're really heading toward serious conflict with China. So it's important, and I don't understand it in much detail, but I'm beginning to accept this as true. It's really a
Yeah.
shame. I really don't want to have a war with China, but we really seem to be headed in that direction.
Well, if we have a war with China, we're outnumbered, are we not?
And maybe outgunned too, and all kinds of
Yeah.
innocent people get caught in the crossfire. And I really
Yeah.
don't like the idea.
So I don't know the politics that much, but why does China want Taiwan so much? Do you
Uh,
know?
Yeah, Taiwan is considered to be like a breakaway part of where all the rebels went that didn't want to get along with the Chinese Communist Party. So they see it as sort of a subversive outpost that really should be part of China.
I see. So kind of like Ukraine with Putin?
Well, yes,
Not
that's right.
exactly.
That's fair enough because
Yeah. Is it,
Putin believes that Ukraine is really part of Russia and that they
yeah.
never should have been separated, and it's been there from time memorial. Time immemorial. That's yeah, it is like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
he'd been trying to get in Ukraine for 20 years. He tried to do it with persuasion and less non-military techniques. In both of them, this is just they wake up every morning saying, "Damn it, why isn't Taiwan back in China?"
Yeah.
They're really
So
convinced they need it back.
yeah, if anybody's interested on YouTube, there's a historian. His name is Mark Felton, Felton. And he has about a 10-15 minute video on the history of Ukraine that goes back to about 400, give or take. And it's a story of loosely, we're part of Russia, we're independent from Russia. We're part of Russia, we're independent. And
Yeah.
just the pendulum swings back and forth. And what Ukraine has is they have the crops, they have manufacturing, and they have raw materials.
Many nations have these places. Like
Yeah,
there's one in yeah, I mean, there's quite a few of these like Kashmir. Kashmir is one of the ones. There's a bunch of places where there's a valuable province that is like two people fight over it like a dog with a bone.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, what happened in Stalin's era is they pushed the Ukrainians out and the Russians moved into the town. So, you know, it is mixed between Russians and Ukrainians. And
Yeah.
I don't know if they are separate today, but I think if historically, if you go back to roots, they're intermixed from that area,
Yeah.
right? It's an arbitrary border that was drawn. Um,
Well, the
and it keeps
Ukrainians are
switching.
pretty determined not to become Russian now.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
quite a lot
Yeah.
of patriotism there.
Yep. I think they got their taste of freedom,
Yeah.
or at least this generation, several
Yeah.
generations
And the same thing
have.
with Taiwan. They got free
Yeah.
from the Chinese Communist Party and they really don't want to go back.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, that's it for me. We'll join up on Tuesday.
Yep.
Sound
Sounds
good?
good. Okay.